pansexual worldview that says all forms of sexual expression are equal and acceptable can be credited to Dr. Alfred C. Kinsey, the father of the sexual revolution. In Fox Searchlight's new biopic, simply titled Kinsey, he is portrayed as a tragic hero who fights for the sexual rights of a repressed society.
We knew Hollywood would airbrush Alfred Kinsey and make him out to be a pioneer of sexual liberation, instead of showing him for the fraud and aider and abetter of child molestation that he really was.
For over 20 years, Judith Reisman has investigated Alfred Kinsey's so-called scientific findings, and in her book, Kinsey, Crimes and Consequences, she reveals the many disturbing faces of Dr. Alfred Kinsey.
His biographers all say that Kinsey was a hands-on scientist. There was nothing that he would have accepted in his book unless he had participated in it, seen it, done it for himself.
When Dr. Alfred Kinsey released his first book in 1948, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, it was called an A-bomb. Kinsey's K-bomb on sexuality. At a time when sex was rarely spoken about, much less studied scientifically, Indiana University professor and zoologist Dr. Alfred Kinsey began his sex research in the late 1930s. Supported by a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation to study human sexuality, Kinsey found himself on a mission to liberate society from its sexual repression and normalize all sexual taboos.
He was a perverted man, deeply perverted. He may even have died of wounds that were self-inflicted during his own sexual activity because he was into self-mutilation and pain. He was a sadomasochistic homosexual.
But in the Hollywood tribute to Kinsey, actor Liam Neeson plays the part of the controversial sex researcher in search of the truth about sexual practices. Bob Knight, director of the Culture and Family Institute for Concerned Women for America, says homosexual director Bill Condon was clever in disguising the true Kinsey.
They showed him having some problems in the movie. They showed some warts. And it's supposed to lure the viewer into the notion that we're showing you the real Kinsey, warts and all. Pay no attention to anything worse. But there was much worse.
One of his key researchers described the fact that Kinsey actually threw out 75% of the people he interviewed. It's as though you had an election, throw out 75% of your votes, and then the 25% win.
In fact, Kinsey's distorted data, collected mostly in the 1940s, alleged that 95% of the male population had committed sexual offenses serious enough to go to jail, and that 40% of married women were having affairs. But why did he garner such credibility then?
We trusted our doctors and we trusted our scientists, and that trust was severely misplaced. So the whole presentation by Indiana University of Kinsey was carefully scripted. It was a Madison Avenue presentation telling the entire nation that Kinsey was finally telling us the truth about ourselves.
In a shocking British television documentary called Secret History, Kinsey's Pedophiles, Kinsey's successor as director of the Kinsey Institute, Paul Gebhard, revealed that Alfred Kinsey was interested in having sex with men, children, and animals. One of Kinsey's most damaging and outrageous claims was that children were sexual from birth.
Alfred Kinsey took away my innocence that I didn't even know I had.
This woman, under the assumed name Esther White, says she is a direct victim of Dr. Alfred Kinsey's. Her grandfather, who went to college with Dr. Kinsey, helped Kinsey gather data on the sexual behaviors of children.
When I was about 3 or 4, my grandfather molested me. And I didn't understand. He was angry at me and said, "Don't you ever tell your grandmother or your mother." I was conditioned to believe that the things that he did were loving and caring things. He was calling it lovemaking. I know now that it's molestation.
One of Kinsey's closest associates and co-authors, Wardell Pomeroy, in a sex publication stated, We found many beautiful and mutually satisfying relationships between fathers and daughters. In another publication, Pomeroy claimed incest between adults and younger children can prove to be a satisfying and enriching experience.
I was constantly afraid because I didn't like what was being done. It was something I had to do because I had to be an obedient child. But I didn't like doing it, and there were times I went into convulsions with excruciating pain in my back, spasms that hit like knife in my back. But he wasn't paying any attention to me. One time, there was a piece of paper that had blown off of the vanity, and when I picked it up, it had little boxes on the side of the page and a lot of questions, and there was a word on there I didn't understand. I asked him what the word orgasm was. As my father was explaining about the word orgasm, he said he had to make a deadline and that he had to send it away.
Esther didn't know anything about the way the Kinsey questionnaire was constructed. When she described to me what her father was filling out, that was the questionnaire.
Esther remembers being questioned by Kinsey and members of his research team in her grandfather's home.
I was told that this was a very important meeting, and I was going to meet a very important man, and that he was going to ask me some questions, and that I was to answer them correctly, and the questions would be, are you happy with your family? Do you love your daddy? And as they were about to leave, my grandfather reminded Alfred Kinsey that, what about the check? And Mr. Kinsey said, oh, I almost forgot. I had the check made out to you and your son because I didn't know which way you would want to split it. I saw the check. I saw Alfred Kinsey hand that check to my grandfather.
According to the Kinsey Institute's own figures, between 317 and 2,035 children were used in these types of sexual experiments.